I'm now standing in front of a monument which commemorates the execution of Edward II's most favourite, how should I say, courtier, and some call him minion, who was executed, brought out of Warwick Castle, given a show trial where he wasn't allowed to speak, and he was accused of treason, hijacking, for want of a better word, the king's favour, and taking all the patronage, inheritance rights away from the barons, and just given to this one person. And he was arrogant, he was an upstart, and he gave the barons, the nobles, I think he called one of them the Black Wolf, or another, I think it was Thomas of Lancaster, he called the I can't remember. Anyway, he gave them insulting names, and they were angry, they didn't like him, they resented him. So they'd captured him, and they took him to Warwick Castle, where he was kept in the dungeon, given a show trial, and at the behest of Guy Beauchamp, which we looked at earlier, and Thomas of Lancaster, who led the rebellious barons, he was condemned to death. So they dragged him here, which is, at least 2 or 3 miles out from the castle, and he was executed. So ends one of how should I put it, notorious dramatic aspects of English history. And Edward, of course, never forgave Lancaster or Warwick, particularly Lancaster, who was one of the most powerful barons, magnates at the time. And that was it. And so Gaveston was summarily dispatched. And Edward kept warning him to stay out of the country because his life was in danger, and of course it was. And so he was given they took the law into their own hands, given judicial murder, because they thought that the king wasn't governing in the most sensibly and in the best interests by lavishing extravagant amounts of taxpayers' money on one man. Okay, so let's look at the plaque. Let's go towards the monument and look at the plaque, which commemorates this violent event. So in case you can't read it, it says, "In the hollow of this rock was beheaded on the it's got the first day of July, although I think it was it said the first day of July, I think it was July the 12th, 1312, by barons lawless as himself, Piers Gaveston, Earl of Cornwall, the minion of a hateful king. In life and death, a memorable instance of misrule." Yes, so Edward was not a good king, and eventually he himself was deposed and murdered because he just was incapable of sound judgment, couldn't rule in the nation's best interest, and was not a solid medieval monarch who embraced the ideals of chivalry, courage, bravado, and warfare. Okay, so that's this about Piers Gaveston. Over and out. Just to add a footnote, it might be a good idea to point out that Gaveston had to be beheaded well away from why wasn't he beheaded or executed in Warwick Castle? Well, if anybody's asking that, it's a good question, because he wasn't, because it had to be the murder, the execution had to be the sole responsibility of one of the ringleaders, a henchman, Thomas of Lancaster. So he had to be beheaded on his land. And that's why, and believe you me, it's quite what people who have documented this have said, oh, it's just a short walk away from the castle grounds. No, it's about at least 2 or 3 miles from Warwick town centre, and the castle's a bit further beyond that. So it's taken me at least 35, 40 minutes to walk from Warwick town centre to here. So the execution had to be taken place on land well away from Warwick, the Earl of Warwick's land, and on Lancaster's land, and that's why he was executed on Gaveston, rather, was executed on this hill.